We're at Haven Gallery today with exhibiting artist Alex Garant with her solo show currently on view called Proprioception. The opening reception is tonight, June 24th, and the exhibition is running through July 30th. So we're really excited to have Alex here. She's going to talk with us a bit about her show, about the work, about her as a person, as an artist, and anything and everything that might come up. So we can start perhaps by talking about the title of your show and what it means, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So proprioception is basically, can't say that word in English, phenomenal.
No, that was good.
Alright, proprioception is the connection of your mind and your brain with the motion that your body is making. So basically, if you close your eyes, you always have an awareness of where your body parts are, where your hands are, where your arms are. So it's that connection between the mind and the position of the body. So I thought it was a great title for my show because there's that illusion or that dizziness with my work that can relate to that title.
I think it's a perfect title, and I was very excited when you first shared it with us.
Oh, great.
Especially with the first painting that you had created for this body of work, The Loudest Absence.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind telling us a bit more about this piece?
Sure. So yeah, that was the first piece I did for the show, the first piece I created. I called it The Loudest Absence actually because when I created it, I thought the characters was fairly small within the space that it occupied, like with the actual canvas. And I actually showed it to a friend, and a friend of mine says, well, the emptiness actually makes me uncomfortable. So I thought it was, The Loudest Absence was actually kind of a great title for it because the absence of element is actually really loud. That's actually what people see in the piece. So that's how it got titled.
That's really awesome. And so I think we should also talk about your technique a little bit. Alla prima.
Right.
Tell us a bit more about how you started painting, what that technique means.
Yeah, so I have a tendency to work wet on wet, meaning I don't usually use glazes or do too many layers. I like to paint wet on wet, meaning like my oil paint is really wet and I keep working it. So I try to do everything in one long session. So if I start a painting, I'll do a sketch, and sometimes I'll do just a quick wash with like acrylic paint just so I get a little bit of a base color. But after that, I just start working with oil paint, and I set all my color on my palette, and I try to work maybe 10 to 12 hours in a row if I can. Obviously, for some pieces, you can't. You have to break it down in a few days. But then I will try to do one area all together, and then the day after I can do another area that can work wet on wet if it's not too sticky. And it just allows me to have more like brush strokes in my work, be a little bit more impulsive with my work. I just like to paint and look at it and see if it feels right and be able to correct it right away. Sometimes I'll do some touch-ups like a few days later when it's a little bit more dry, but usually I try to get everything done in like one long session. Even if it goes over a few days, I still consider it one session because my paint is usually still a little bit wet.
Cool. You can definitely tell there's a lot of texture and a lot of painterly application, which I think really brings the work more to life and gives a bit more interest to the pieces. There's a lot of very tightly rendered work in these. So I think people really appreciate seeing the artist's hand and the human element behind the work as well.
Right, like we talked about before, I think sometimes I feel a bit self-conscious that my work is a little loose, but I think it's just what works for me. And I try to do work that were really sharp before, but I find that the final result doesn't have the illusion that I like. Like I like the effect of the blurriness of the piece, that you confuse basically the layers together, and I think you can achieve that look only if you get a little bit more looser with your paint brushes and your paint strokes.
Absolutely. And I also like how historical your work can look and be interpreted. I think that you have that modern and contemporary aspect that makes it a bit more relevant and more understandable for a broader audience. But historically, the portrait has been a style and subject of art for so long now.
Yeah.
And you bring that in compositionally, but obviously with your technique and the double eye method, you're doing something quite different and innovative, which also brings in your background with design and appreciation for symmetry and shape and form. And I think with the technique of having the paint be a bit more painterly and texturized, you're bringing in other periods perhaps as well, and integrating that element of history.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always, portraits have been around forever, and it's always, I think it's a way to write down history, right? When you look at a portrait or anything that's, you know, represent a person or a lifestyle, you always have an idea when the painting was created. So I think it's a good idea to kind of document the period you live in with your art. But a portrait on its own is universal. I mean, we're human beings and we're going to be around for a long time, maybe.
I hope.
I think dinosaurs are going to take over soon. But yeah, so it's always about like using something that's traditional, like the portrait, and then bring it to something that's a bit more modern. And obviously there's the digital era will always have an influence on art, and it's kind of the same thing that happened when photography was invented. It did influence how people would be framing their painting, right? Instead of having a very sensual composition, suddenly you would have characters that would be cut off, and that just came across because of the invention of photography. So it's the same thing where, like, I think modern media can influence more traditional mediums.
And I think it's really important for any artist and any creative is to have work that will withstand the test of time. And I really do feel like your paintings do that, because bringing in the historical but also having something contemporary, but not lacing it with, you know, anything too specific to that period.
Right.
Because then it just becomes too focused. And more about like the object or about that time. And as you mentioned, the portrait, the face, you know, women, you know, are very commonly painted, and something that we're always going to recognize, understand, and appreciate. Yeah,
well, women are beautiful, so I think the word being painted.
Your models are very beautiful.
But yeah, like that's something too. When I choose my model, obviously I choose model that I think are obviously beautiful, but it's also about finding features that I think are a little bit universal. Like a lot of people will identify with them. So I have a few models that I work with, like some are in New York, some are in Toronto, but it's those type of features that I think everybody can identify with. So it makes the work a little bit less, I mean, you can necessarily identify who the model is, also because of the technique, which I think more people will relate to the work.
Absolutely.
I hope anyway.
Your models are beautiful, but they also have a very specific look to them that makes them a bit more broad. Visually, there's nothing that specific, I think, to really separate them from general population.
Right.
So people can usually identify, recognize someone or something within the portraits themselves, and then the slight abstraction that you do to kind of create that double eye effect, I think allows for that broader interpretation too.
Yeah, I tried to do some self-analysis once and try to find out, how do I pick my model? Like, why do I see like a girl and I'm like, oh, I want to paint her? And I think it all comes from my childhood. Obviously, everything always comes from my childhood. But when I was a kid, I used to draw with my mom, and my mom would always draw the same face. Like, she would take a piece of paper, she would draw her face, and I would color it in, like, you know, put fake makeup on and stuff like that.
And the fun part.
Yeah, right? And I think that the type of models I choose actually kind of look like the faces that my mom used to draw for me when I was a kid. So
It's that attraction kind of stays with you.
Right.
And you don't notice it at the time because it's so commonplace, but as you get older, certain things start to stand out and become more appealing. And
you start to identify the patterns, like things always come back in your life. So
I mean, a fairly obvious question that I do have to ask. Was there a focus on the eyes in particular when you were younger, when you drew with your mom?
Yeah, well, obviously my mom was, like I said, she was drawing those faces that was very like 70s type graphic drawing, and it was always like those big eyes, a small nose, and beautiful lips, and like very, very 70s, those beautiful drawings. So yeah, I think there was always a focus on that, but I think when I started drawing when I was a kid, I was one of those, like, you know, the first thing you draw is always an eye. I mean, it's just come naturally because that's the thing you look at the most. You can look at your own eyes in the mirror, it's kind of easy. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I always liked doing portraits, like all the time. When I went to art school, I was doing a lot of portraits as well.
And I remember your early work too. You still had, multiple eyes present,
Yeah.
but it didn't have the kind of effect that I think you now achieve, where it is a bit blurred out. It is a bit hypnotizing and a bit sometimes dizzying at times.
Yeah, I always loved doing symmetry.
Yeah.
So I always loved doing a duplication of an image and just do it on one side, do it again on the other side. I'll always love doing that. I also like really stiff composition. So I think even if my paintings are pretty loose, I need a sense of order when it comes to composition.
You're very, very right, actually. It has a nice contrast because of that.
Yeah, I find structure somewhere.
Yeah.
It's like an art studio. It's like it's chaos, but it's structure to it.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So I think we should focus on a couple of paintings now. Some that maybe stand out to you that you'd like to talk about.
It's up to you. I mean,
right in front of Mothers and Armies.
Sure.
We could also go to the Loudest Absence and Loving Eternally as well at some point.
Sure.
So let's start. Actually, these are all the same model.
yes.
Right?
So yeah, her name is Sarah. So she lives in Toronto. I can tell you a little bit more about the model because that's actually a lot of people ask. A lot of people send me emails and they want to be a model and they don't necessarily understand not how it works, but how I choose my models. So I was looking for a new model and then I came across this amazing Playboy editorial. It was great, and it was Sarah was the model, and I realized that she lived in Toronto, and I was just in love with her. I thought she was like the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. So I booked her to do a reference photo session. So she basically came to my house, and for 1 hour I just took a bunch of reference photos with different lights and different angles and close up. And when I work on those paintings, I'm gonna go through my reference photos and basically choose the one that speaks to me. And the great thing is, because of the way I work, I can use like similar reference photos and give them a different treatment. So we talked a little bit before about how my composition is a little bit stiff, and I have elements that come back all the time, like the overlay and the duplication of the image. Well, I can do many variation of that image by creating pieces with different colors or even different texture or different gradients. So I try to explore more when it comes to like colors. I don't give myself, I don't limit myself when it comes to colors. I just, whatever I feel that day, that's what I'm going to be doing. So yeah, so that piece was, actually it's like a good comeback, it's a good transition piece when we talked to my earlier piece, that symmetry, where I often, years ago, basically all my pieces was always two characters that were mirrored. So that's a good transition piece, I think, when we...
So this kind of harks back to another period for you. And why the title Mothers and Armies?
So this one I like the title, I came up with the title because I found that somehow there was some kind of relationship between the two characters, but at the same time I see them as this weird like competing energy almost between the two characters. So I see an alliance, but at the same time almost like an arch enemy where there's that relationship.
Yeah, there's some kind of conflict.
That's right. So obviously when I paint, I sometimes create stories when I work on it. I'm like, okay, maybe there's like that mother figure with the daughter, or I don't like to say too much, especially like about titles like that, because I love people coming up with their own interpretation. But that's basically the emotion behind the piece.
I think there's so much to be taken, and as each person comes in and experiences the work, they'll have their own stories and their own memories to kind of imprint on the work. And so
exactly, that's the best part. When I go to a show, especially if people don't know who I am, and then they look at my art and they talk about it, that's my favorite.
I always probably kind of feel like bad because when we sit at the gallery on a daily basis during normal hours, we always get to hear what people have to say about the work and the stories and what it reminds them of and how it makes them feel. And I always want to write it down and be like, this is what happened to me, and send it off to the artist. And it's just, it's very special, and it's something that I wish you guys had more access to, because not just the imagery but the technique, seeing that in person, seeing those brush strokes, seeing the different colors that are layered in, and you don't get that from online, unfortunately. And it also just had some more visceral experience for the person, I think, viewing the work.
Oh, absolutely. Like social media, we post a lot of art on social media these days, and you're right, you don't see the texture, you don't see the graininess, you don't see the tiny little defects that makes it an original,
Yeah.
like little fluff, little paintbrush hair, the little like, you know, pieces corner that's not varnished properly. I have a lot of those tiny little
Everyone knows.
defects, right? But it's what makes an original an original.
And it makes us human.
That's right. Yeah, because it shows the process that the piece went through to be
Yeah.
created. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Love Me Eternally, which has become one of my favorite.
Really?
It's actually, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear more about her, their coloring in particular, because I think in person that white background is just so stunning.
Oh.
And it's quite different.
Yeah. So I just wanted doing something that was really clean. I do love really plain backgrounds. I like just the figure to stand out. I don't feel like I need to necessarily build a setting, like a visual situation for those characters. I feel like they stand on their own. So I wanted to do something that was really clean. Like she was nowhere. You really have to
Void.
make up. Yeah, the void.
It's that negative space as well again, and how that makes you feel.
That's right. Yeah. I guess it's too. We're finding all my patterns together.
Yeah. We should
But-
secrets in detail.
But yeah, that was the goal for this piece. I just wanted to make these standalone characters that was really pure.
The innocence.
That's
for sure.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And when I created her facial expression, for me, there's a sense of longing. There's a sense of like wanting in her eyes, and I don't know. I found that overall, I think she was very romantic, even if I don't
Yeah,
necessarily like the
absolutely.
word romantic, but there's a sense of romance in it, and like I said, like of wanting more. So
Yeah.
it's funny because when I talk about my piece, I can easily kind of describe how the character feels in the piece, but
I think I like the innocence, and that's
Yeah.
what kind of draws me in. Thank you, Alex, for speaking with us and coming here and spending time with us as well with respect to your show. We're very excited for the opening.
thank you for having me.
Of course, and thank you for such beautiful paintings. We're excited to share them with the community, and the show is up through July 30th. If anybody would like to come by and see the show, our website's www.havenartgallery.com. You can also see Alex's work online if you can't make it in person.